Okay. Hi, everybody. June 27th, John Solider here in Dallas. Welcome to the call across America, across Canada, across Mexico. And I think even we got some folks on from Ecuador tonight, too. So welcome to everybody, wherever you are. Welcome tonight. Tonight is for you. Tonight will be a lot of information about our wonderful company, Immunotech, and a product that has no equal, Immunical. And we've got a very, very special guest. I'm going to get to him in a minute, but we want to include our Spanish friends as well. So I'm going to turn the call over to my good friend from Monterrey, Mexico, Heidi Sandoval. She's going to speak to you in Spanish. Welcome, Heidi.
Hola a todos, soy John Soler. Estoy hablando desde Estados Unidos este miércoles 27 y estamos dirigiéndonos a todos desde Canadá, Estados Unidos y México y tal veces algunas personas desde Guatemala.
Well, welcome, everybody. Hey, the person I'm going to be speaking to tonight is a co-founder of Immunotech Research. He's been the vice president of research and development for well over 20 years, beginning in 1997. He worked directly with Dr. Bunos as well as Dr. Drobe, contributing over 30 medical publications and several patent applications. John's also played a critical role in the development of the sports applications for the company, with overseeing the clinical work on the product and the establishment of our partnership with the sports science firm Oracle over a decade ago. John, welcome and thank you for taking the time with us. Let us begin with the subject that fascinates me to this day, the story and the development of Immunical. Take us through some of the highlights of those early years, if you will.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Heidi. It's great to be here today. Well, the story of Immunical begins with a man behind it, Dr. Gustavo Bunos. Now, he was born in Lucerne, Italy in 1928 and educated at the University of Turin and the University of Genoa. Dr. Gustavo Bunos' distinguished career in medical research began as a research fellow in surgery at the Indiana Medical Center, Indianapolis, which led to his appointment as professor of surgery, first at the University of Sherbrooke and then at McGill University. Dr. Bunos was awarded the 1965 Medal of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. In 1968, he was named Career Investigator of the Medical Research Council of Canada, an award that was reconfirmed in 1993, the year of his retirement from McGill University. The Medical Research Council of Canada, which was first set up in 1936, funded health research and research training universities, healthcare institutions, and research institutes. One of the goals was to allow individual scientists to freely pursue research in the area of their choice. The only restriction was a thorough periodical peer review to ascertain that the scientific method was there and that the conclusions were compatible with the results. I point this out because all the initial funding for the discovery came through this institute. Dr. Bunos explained to me how stressful it was to go through these reviews where all your funding was on the line each time they came to visit to evaluate your work. Now, what did he discover back in 1978? Well, in a mouse model provided by his colleague, immunologist Dr. Patricia Kongshaven, they accidentally found that animals fed whey protein produced more antibodies to standard antigens. So something in the whey protein was having a profound impact on how the immune system of these mice were responding to a challenge. But since this discovery, like most, had not been planned, they had to find out why. Through this initial research, they determined that it was due in part to the cysteine content of this whey protein mixture. Now, success, as you know, is never linear, and life was about to throw a huge curveball at Dr. Bunos and his team. Namely, the Medical Research Council of Canada's research priorities had now shifted to the gene, and his research funding and salary was cut. The whole program was saved by a chance meeting with Mr. Dieter Beer. After meeting with Dr. Bunos, Mr. Beer was convinced this scientific work had great promise, and he agreed to provide Dr. Bunos with an office and continue funding the program. During the subsequent years, Dr. Bunos continued to research while traveling the globe with Mr. Beer, meeting the scientific directors of a number of pharma companies as he looked at different venues to try and commercialize his discovery. Now again, we arrive at a pivotal crossroads in the story. Mr. Beer received a phone call from the former head of research of one of Canada's largest pharma companies and asked if he could get some Immunical for his mother, who was extremely sick. He asked if Mr. Beer was going to deal with the company to commercialize Immunical. Mr. Beer said he was still unsure at the time. The former head of research said to him, "Don't do a deal with us, take it directly to the people." It was within a year of that conversation that Mr. Beer and Dr. Bunos met with Chuck Roberts and myself in September 1996 to discuss doing business together. We signed the papers in 1996 of November, and began business as Immunotech Research in 1997. And the rest, they say, is history.
Thank you for sharing that story with our audience. As they say, it is hard to know where you are going if you don't know where you've been. Now let's pivot to an area that's near to my heart and yours, the sports application. With the early focus on immune deficiency, tell us the story of how you and Dr. Bunos pivoted to start looking at its effect on human performance.
Well, when we formed the company, I was at the tail end of my competitive career. As I worked and traveled with Dr. Bunos, we spent a lot of time together. While he shared much of his knowledge on science and medicine with me, I in turn shared my experience as a competitive athlete with him. I was training anywhere from an hour to 7 hours a day and was always in a depleted state. But that changed dramatically when I started to take Immunical. I was amazed at how I responded to the product. A friend of mine who was the Ironman record holder for Canada at the time summed it up perfectly. He said, "John, you know, I've tried hundreds of supplements and nothing has made me feel like Immunical." I started to share the product with athletes, the former champion, Olympic distance, triathlons, women's world record holder in mountain bike, to name a few, and they had a similar response to me. We started to focus on designing a clinical trial to elicit what we were seeing and experience anecdotally. The first study in a model of aerobic exercise in young adults was done with Dr. Larry Lanz at the Montreal Children's Hospital. We showed an average performance improvement of 13.5% in the Immunical group versus the group on placebo. The second study in a model of resistance exercise in elderly adults was done through the University of Montreal at one of their research centers. We showed an average increase of 10.5% in performance in a model of resistance exercise versus the placebo group. While we were conducting these studies, Health Canada changed the rules and requirements for making certain claims on the health products. We submitted the data and were granted the right to make a performance claim on Immunical, which is unique in the industry.
So, John, now we have a relationship with Orico, and it's played a huge part in the benefits of Immunical for the athletic community. Can you describe how that relationship came about, and now that we've been working with them some 10 years, what some of the results have been?
Yeah, so this relationship has really been a godsend for Immunotech. Through them, we've been able to get the product to some of the best amateur and pro athletes in the world. Now, the most important point in all this, we did not pay 1 cent to do this. It was purely on the merits of how the product performed, both in their labs and on the playing field. I remember receiving the first email from Dr. Nathan Lewis, a nutritionist with the English Institute of Sport, back in 2011. Who at the time was working with the British Olympic sailing team, and he inquired about Immunical for his athletes. A few months later, Dr. Lewis let me know he was joining a firm called Orico, now working with hundreds of athletes across multiple disciplines. They are pioneering novel advancements in applied physiology, biostatistics, statistics, cognitive computing to arm coaches, medical practitioners, trainers, and athletes with the knowledge and actionable insights to maximize availability and sustain peak performance. They use Immunical as part of their intervention program to help maintain these athletes in peak form. So in addition to our own clinical data on Immunical, we are getting real-time information from Orico as to how the product impacts these athletes across multiple data points. To give you an example of the value of this relationship, the most recognized soccer player in the world, Lionel Messi, will move to Inter Miami next year. We spoke with the club's performance specialist last year due to a referral by Orico. After the conversation, we came to an agreement to use Immunical as part of the player's nutrition program. So we could see the most famous soccer player in the world next year on Immunical.
Wow, well, thank you, John. And just a couple of quick questions on that. So, we take that, 1/100th of a % of athletes, somebody like Messi, for example, one of the best ever in his respective sport. How does that translate to the weekend warrior, right? And you and I talk about this all the time because of our mutual age being about the same, and we're still, you and I are both still very active athletically. Some of our colleagues are. But, if you take the person who's just mowing their lawn on the weekend or, playing with the grandchildren or walking the dog, right up to somebody who's still, very, very active competition wise, how does that translate to them that these world-class and professional athletes are using the same product that he or she can use in their training to prepare for whatever events they're doing, or if they're not competing, maybe they want to be stronger, they want to be fitter, they want to feel better, most importantly. How does that translate?
Well, I would think of it this way. Lionel Messi is probably the world's greatest soccer player, but he's still a human being. I mean, he has an immune system that deals with all different types of challenges. He has, a recovery aspect to his program. Performance aspect, and the same thing with the average person. I mean, the average person is still focused on, will I be able to do these activities as I age, etc. So you're still dealing with things like resiliency. You're still dealing with the capacity to do these things. So while Messi is focused on scoring goals, the weekend warrior is focusing on being able to do this on a weekly basis and enjoy the activities that he or she impacts their quality of life. So it's while it's different goals, so to speak, it's still there's still the same things as staying healthy, recovering from the activities, staying strong, etc.
One other question, John, that comes up, and then I'm going to bring our friend Heidi back on the call as well and see if she has a question or comment for you as well. But let's talk about the brain a little bit. One of the things that we've been finding right through Dr. Linsman's work and other people's work with the brain is the benefits of Immunical as we age, right? Be it dementia, be it Alzheimer's, be it the other diseases of the brain, so to speak, that maybe our grandparents didn't have because they died at premature ages than what we're living to today. I mean, today there's so many people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, even 100, for example. I was reading this morning. I shared with you my trivia question earlier about the founding of the National Football League, and I found that Virginia McCaskey is the 100-year-old owner of the Chicago Bears. And she's still running that franchise at 100 years old, George Halas's daughter, right? So we're hearing that more commonplace of people living longer. But living longer is great. But living longer and still having your faculties is really the goal of most of us. What are we finding with some of the research that's been done by Linsman and others in terms of the brain?
Well, the glutathione exists in every single cell in the body and plays a pivotal role in the brain. I'll give you an example. Some of the work we've done at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal, the Lady Davis Institute, with Dr. Hyman Schipper, who is one of the investigators now in our mild cognitive impairment study. We did a study in a mouse model he designed, and this mouse model, essentially what happens, the way the mice were bred, they were genetically bred to overexpress a protein that deposited a lot of iron in the brain. And essentially what you're creating is a pro-oxidant state, an inflammatory state. And he said to me, this is really how a lot of neurodegenerative diseases begin with regard to, this pro-oxidant setting or this inflammatory setting. And boosting this natural defense, which is glutathione, helps mediate that. So you essentially help buffer the inflammatory state. And, that this is part of the aging process is, after a certain, particularly around the 4th or 5th decade of life, we go from, a reductive state to this pro-oxidant state. And it's a hallmark of unhealthy aging. So by maintaining adequate stores of glutathione, there's real benefits in terms of boosting the brain's resiliency. And we have a number of examples in that, particularly in our work on concussions, where we had a model of a concussion, and the mice that were consuming Immunical were able to buffer the injury induced by the concussive blow. So boosting glutathione plays a critical role in the brain, vis-a-vis the inflammatory state that can be induced by blows to the head, or things like diabetes, as well as unhealthy lifestyle and pollutants in the environment.
So Heidi, I'm going to just turn it to you for a second. Do you have a question for John?
Yes, thank you, John. Well, I have a question about children, as a mom, as a homeschooler mom, and as a mom of an Asperger kid who's my older boy. Um, and nowadays, having the autism very strong in in our lives, how can we comment or talk about Immunical to those moms or families that have this need of give something good food or a good supplement to our children? How could you tell us something that we can do with our children and our product Immunical?
Well, you may be aware that we recently published a study in autism in 3 to 5-year-old children from Nova Southeastern University. It was done with one of the largest institutes of autism in the United States, and we're able to show that we were able to raise glutathione in these kids, and autistic kids by definition have low glutathione status, which can cause a number of complications, and we're also able to affect behavior in these kids. This article has been published, and I'm sure if you email John or email me, I can send you the article. So that would be a good starting point.
Okay, and I have another question about nowadays our young people are very stressed because they work so hard. Sometimes they work from 7 to 10. They are workaholic. A lot of our young people is very workaholic, and their levels of stress are so high that they get sick for things of sick illnesses that we have never seen before in young people. So I think Immunical can help them a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about the control of stress with Immunical?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When we talk about stress, and we see for instance, in our work in prehabilitation, where we give patients who are about to undergo surgery because they have cancer, a nutrition program combined with 20 grams of Immunical, together with a nutrition plan and exercise plan, that we boost the resiliency of these patients. And so they tend to recuperate quicker, and they can start the chemo earlier. The same thing you see in athletes. When we talk about Lionel Messi, when Lionel Messi is playing over the course of the season, they have, a fatigue debt that builds up because of training stress, traveling stress. It's no different than what young people go through, where they're stressed from their job. Dr. Linsman also explained to me that excessive stress has a neurodegenerative effect in the brain. So, boosting glutathione is very, very important. And so, whether you're talking about training stress for an athlete, or surgical stress, or stress because of lack of sleep, emotional events, etc., Immunical is a really great application in those cases.
Thank you very much, John.
Great. So, John, just to wrap up, number one, I want to thank you on behalf of everybody. John jumped in here. He's got another engagement tonight, so you're seeing him recorded. I appreciate that. I appreciate his time so much. But, hey, John, one last quick question, okay? We talk a lot about Dr. Bunos. Dr. Kongshaven, of course, thank God, is still with us, comes to some of our events. Folks have met her. Dr. Droog, we don't talk a great deal about. Can you just share with everybody a little bit about who Dr. Wolf Droog was?
Well, yeah. I mean, we were so fortunate to be able to have the services of Dr. Droog. You're talking about someone who was a professor at Harvard. He was a member of the Max Planck Institute. He was a professor of biology at the University of Heidelberg. He ran the immunochemistry division of the German National Cancer Institute. He probably has 350 articles. He's the sole author of a number of articles that have been referenced thousands of times. You know, he was a savant, and there's a phenomenon that occurs in unhealthy aging as well as in AIDS and cancer, where patients lose muscle mass called cachexia, and he's the man who discovered that. They call it the Droog syndrome, and he explained to me, you know, that he had a pile of offers on his desk when he retired from the German National Cancer Institute, which you're supposed to retire, or you have to retire at 65. And he chose to come to Immunotech to continue researching using Immunical. So that says everything about, you know, the scientist he is, as well as the veracity of the product and, you know, our philosophy that reputation is very, very important for these people. And they're going to be very careful about, you know, who they associate with and what they associate with. And, you know, after all these years in academia, as well as working for these government institutions, he chose to come to a small company in Canada to continue researching Immunical.
Amazing, amazing. And of course, we wouldn't have our Immunical Platinum product without him, correct?
Right.
Well, John, this has been a privilege. Thank you so much, Heidi, as well. And thanks again, and we'll talk soon.